Good afternoon and welcome to the third concurrent session of the day, co-requisite and traditional English composition. Our presenter with us today is Emily Maddox from Rowan College, South Jersey. Professor Emily Maddox has worked in higher education for 15 years. She is an English instructor at Rowan College, South Jersey, and the coordinator of 2 English courses, Principles of English Grammar and Readings in Literature. Professor Maddox has also been involved in efforts to redesign developmental English education at Rowan College. If you have any questions for Emily during this session, please feel free to go ahead and enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of our Zoom meeting, and we will address them at the end of our time. On that note, I'll hand it on over to Emily.
Good afternoon. Let me just all right. I think I'm sharing my screen. I've been doing this for about a year now with the Zoom teachings. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about, co-requisite and traditional English composition courses. At my college, we have 2 different versions of Eng 101. We have traditional Eng 101, and then we have enhanced English composition 1, which is a 4-credit version of 101, and that's geared towards students who test into the developmental area. So I'll talk to you about those 2 versions, and also in multiple formats. Since we've had a year of COVID teaching and everything, there's going to be some 1 year later reflection points, things that I've learned from moving from a mostly face-to-face teaching format to an online format, what worked, what didn't work. So that's where I'm going to focus. So some things I already mentioned. I will go over kind of a brief history of the co-recs that are on our CSJ's campus, and the brief explanation of the structure and design of Eng 101E, the benefits, and then moving best practices towards the end, but I will talk about best practices more for online based on what changes we've made. What happens next, basically, after they take either Eng 101 or Eng 101A, outcomes, how we measure our outcomes at our CSJ, and see what the best. All right, so brief history. It's been about 10 years before we created Eng 101E. We used to have 3 tiers of developmental writing classes, right? So we had a class that was Eng 04, or is COM 044, and that was like basically sentence level writing. And then we had 066, which was the paragraph level, and then we had 088, which was the essay level. And and we played around with some things. At one point, we eliminated the sentence level course and had 066 and 088, and then we created a monster course that was 077, and it was a combination of the paragraph level and the essay level course, and then finally we ended up with Eng 101E, which focuses on the essay level. And one thing that we figured out was that a lot of times students would place into COM 088, and they would write college level essays and get graded on those, and not receive college level credits for that. And then they would go on to Eng 101 and do basically exactly the same thing and get credit for it. So the administration decided to combine COM 088 and ING 101 into one class and make it a 4-credit class of that they would receive 4 credits. 3 of them would be go on their transcript count towards graduation, transferable credits to the next school. And they would knock out in what used to take 1 full year, they would do, or longer if they needed those earlier classes, the 044 and the 066. Now it only takes 1 semester to move through ING 101 and then move into ING 102 at the next semester, right alongside their ING 101 cohorts, and move to that. So now what used to take semesters takes 1 year, and then they can basically complete their English requirement in 1 year, or a year and a half if they need, if they test into our ING 107 class, which is Principles of English Grammar. So a year or a year and a half, which is still much less than it used to be. And both of these classes are college level and credit bearing courses, transferable. So that's one solution that we created at the college. So ING 101, it's a 4 credit class. So it has extra instructional time compared to the 3 credit version, which is the major difference. Another nice difference is a smaller class size than 101. Typically between 18 and 20, depending on enrollment and an enrollment style, because we're supposed to have fewer students in an online version than face-to-face. And for comparison, our cap sizes are usually 25 for 101. So there's, 5 to 7 students fewer in 101A, which is substantial. So that gives more one-on-one time for between the student and the instructor. Right, so same responsibilities. Syllabus is very closely related. We're going to focus on basically the writing process, critical thinking and reading, composition, and beginning the process of research and analysis, right? So the goal is that they are ready to move into, that they'll be on the same level as anybody that tests into our regular English 101 course and be able to keep up with their English 101 peers when they move into ING 102 together as one group. So yeah, as I mentioned, the overall curriculum is identical to traditional ING 101. The coordinator of 101 is the same as she coordinates 101 and 101A, right? So that helps keep it identical and keep them closely related. So we have 4 essays that we require. One is either a narrative or an exposition that is not researched. And then usually we try to have one that's going to be a process, whether it be comparison, contrast, cause and effect, or process analysis. And then one argumentation. And then finally, we have one common in-class essay that is based on a single source. So we have a full researched essay, that is our argumentation, and at least 3 of our essays are source essays. The difference being source essays might only use one source, whereas a research essay would use multiple sources. And then we have standard textbook. We require an oral presentation at the end of the semester based on their argumentation paper, and we instructors can choose, any supplemental readings that they want. So some of the benefits from having ING 101E is, first of all, the extra time, right? Having that extra time, which this semester I'm using the extra time for grammar, grammar concepts. I gave them a grammar diagnostic in the middle of the semester, and then based on the results of the scores, that told me what I need to focus on. So every week or so, when I have time at the end of class, we'll do some grammar exercises together, and that so that's how I'm spending that extra time. Some semesters I might spend it in a different way. So having that flexibility is really nice, and so I can provide students with extra guidance, more discussion, if they need more class time for assignments, or whatever they need, and their needs might change throughout the semester. Another benefit is we have a range of ability levels, which is really nice to have, where we can have really robust conversations, and the nice thing is, if there is a situation where a student maybe didn't test well, or has been away as a non-traditional student and has been away from college for a long time and tests into ING 101E instead of ING 101, it doesn't really matter, right? The worst thing that happens is they end up in a class where they have an extra time with their instructor, smaller class size, and so actually kind of more benefits. And then at the end of the semester, they still move on to ING 102, and they've lost nothing. They get their credits for ING 101 that transfers to their next college that will count towards graduation. So they lose nothing if they are, tested and maybe are at the higher range of ability levels. So it's there's a lot of benefit for that. And then the other is financial, which is it's extremely important, especially at the community college level, when we have a lot of first generation college students that don't have a lot of money of their own, and are taking loans or using financial aid. One thing that happens a lot of times is that students previously would take a lot of developmental classes over and over again, and then that they would run out of financial aid, and they would have nothing to show for it. So now students are not in any developmental classes. They get their college credits, they get transferable credits, they move on quicker, and they spend way less money in the process. So financial benefits is key, and the students tend to appreciate that when they hear how much they would move more quickly. Other benefits are emotional. I noticed, when we first, I think I taught 088, like us one spring, like, spring of 14 or something. And then the following fall, I taught 101E, and I noticed a difference immediately in same students, right? They tested in 088, and then those same students, same test level, not the same students, but moved into tested into 101E over the summer, when they would have been in 088 if they tested it for the spring semester. And there was a definite difference in the way students approached the course, in the way that they approached me, in the way that that they took it more seriously. So I think giving students first of all, a more robust but also, giving them that opportunity to prove that they are college ready is a big emotional benefit. Less time, we talked about that. It's definitely will help improve students' odds of graduating within 6 years, which, you know, we've seen that, you know, the data shows that students who spend, you know, a long time in developmental classes, if they don't take a college level English within their first year, and a college level math within their first year, that their odds of graduating within 6 years are you know, abysmal. So getting them in college level immediately, giving them the opportunity to first of all, to prove to them that they can do it, and second of all, to allow them to prove that they can do it, and getting them through it quicker is a huge benefit on time, and helps them get through within the 6 years, hopefully sooner than that. Increased learning, right? We can spend, students are going to be a little bit more prepared because they'll have that extra time, and maybe possibly outperform their 101 counterparts once they all move into 102 together. Doesn't always happen, but it can, right? We've had extremely talented 101E students who've outperformed their 102s. And since I teach 102, you know, there are students that I've taught in 101E, and then they move into 102 with me, and there are students that I've taught in 101 and then moved into 102 with me, and then there are new students that I'm unfamiliar with, that I don't know what they had or who they had. I mean, I can run their transcript and find out. So it's always interesting to see what happens in 102 when everybody is in the same class together. So what happens next? Well, basically what happens next is students that are in 101 or 101E move into 102. 102 is at my college for now is a literature-based course. So that means that students read and analyze fiction, poetry, and drama. And at the end of the semester, they have a research paper on a literary topic. We've also been experimenting with themed courses that we still do all of these things, but the literature is focused either on topics in business, health science, or STEM. And that's an experiment for people in those majors, that they can take a themed course that matches up with their major. And so we've been experimenting with that and possibilities there. And that's something we'll probably continue to do in the future. So their grades in 101E typically predict how they'll perform in 102, right? So A students in 101E tend to get A's and B's, sometimes C's in 102. And then, you know, B students perform predictably. And then when we have D students in 101E, they're probably most likely to earn F's in 102, right? Because D basically means that they met the bare minimum requirements to pass, but probably were not, you know, sufficient and in their understanding or their effort level, or, you know, whatever the disconnect was. So when they move, when D students in 101E move into 102, they typically earn F's. So again, they perform as expected. So outcomes assessment, you know, we're very much focused on outcomes and assessment, and at the RCSJ, and, you know, we have a division devoted entirely to that. So in my department, actually, the English department, we have very similar assessment structure for ING 101 and ING 101E, and then also for ING 102. So basically, we have a common department-wide in-class essay for all 101E and 101 students. And what happens is we assign an essay during class or online if we're on live online like we are now, or online traditional online classes, that they'll have about 75 to 80 minutes to complete it. And the instructors grade the essays like they would, basically like they would any other essay. And that grade is calculated in the grade book, just like any other essay. But then institutional research creates a sample size of students and contacts the instructor directly. And then the instructor has to upload the essays for those students that are that are selected for the sample. And then we have two readers, grade the uploaded essays independently. And the essays have no identifying information that links back to the student. So the readers are truly reading blind. They don't know whose work they're grading. And then those scores are what we use for assessment. So we're doing that in 101, 101E, and 102. And then we have years that are what we call reporting years, where we have to report our data. And we have years that we're not reporting years. So if it's not a reporting year, we stop at the step here. And then if it is a reporting year, we have the two readers and they grade. So this year is a reporting year. So in the fall, we did that. And yeah, and I don't think we're going to do that for this spring because we have more. In the fall, we have more sections of 101 and 101E than we do in the spring. So in the spring, we would report the 102 results, and then the fall, we would report the 101 results. Okay, all right, so COVID-19, 1 year later, almost to the day even. So last year, March 2020, is getting ready to do Hawks, actually, to IES. And instead everybody went remote, right? So last year, I had to, just like everyone else, we had to change everything about how we were teaching and what format, and learn Zoom quickly, and restructure our Blackboard or whatever our LMS was. And if we didn't have an LMS, we had to create an LMS, so there was a lot of shuffling around and learning, and everybody was in the same boat, right? Students didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was happening. And policies were changing, hourly. It was a lot that happened. So last year, when that happened, I was able to fairly quickly reorient everybody back onto Blackboard. And there were a couple of things that helped us do that, so that they were basically able to perform consistently for the rest of the semester as they were, for the first half. So there were a couple of things that I did, either that I started to do after this shift, or that I had already started shifting in that direction, and so I was able to kind of prepare them and myself for that shift. So one thing, of course, was just Blackboard, using it as effectively as possible, and I use it every semester anyway. So my students were not too overwhelmed in navigating Blackboard, because they already had practice with that. The other thing that I did was weekly guides where I would have basically a checklist of everything that was due for the week, each week, so that they could have one piece of paper posted on Blackboard each week that would help, help them through. Regular communication. At the time, I was using the, I forget what the app, it was an app that I was using on my phone, and it would basically, they could sign up for the app, and yeah, I would be able to send them text messages, but it wouldn't be, I didn't know their actual number. So there was a degree of privacy for them and for me. And so that was good that I was able to do that. I don't do that now because I communicate with them solely through Blackboard, and I'm trying to be consistent with that. But at the time, I continued using the communication devices that I already was using. And then a more or less natural transition, which I actually, especially in composition, English Composition 1 and 101E, I changed the way I teach from the first half of the semester to the second half of the semester. I spend a lot of time teaching students how to write in the first half of the semester, and then the second half of the semester is more giving lab-based time where they actually do writing. So that transition kind of helped in moving to an online format, because I was able to basically work with them individually throughout the rest of the semester, and they were able to complete their work. Okay, right. So live online was what we did for basically 95, I would say, safely. I don't have the exact numbers, but basically 95% of all classes on our CSJ's campus were what we call live online. So we did that and started that fall 2020. And so we're almost one full year through that, right? Spring 2021, we're halfway through the spring. So basically what that meant was that we would have live lectures via Zoom during the scheduled course time. Students would be aware, just like they would register for face-to-face class, they would register for a live online class that was designated as live online. And it told them that it was also going to be online, so that they would need the technology to do that. And it told them, what days and times that they would be meeting with the instructor. So it has some similarities as face-to-face, but obviously it's all online, through Zoom. So basically the course lives in Blackboard. Everything's happens on Blackboard. That's our LMS. And so the Zoom link is available through Blackboard. All of our assignments and tests and the discussion board and anything else we do. There's a consistency there on Blackboard. And then if we have any supplemental work is due online, just like any traditional online course. So one thing that I do in all my classes is, for better or worse, all of my work is due Sunday night at midnight. Every Sunday night, every midnight, so there's some consistency there, except for the last week that ends on a Wednesday for some reason. But everything else, so students know that they have work for me due Sunday at midnight. So that's I guess the good part. But then I don't know that there's any really good day or time to have things due, but that works out okay, because then for me, every class ends, the week ends on Sunday night at midnight, and the new week begins 12:01 Monday morning. And that seems to work out, and the students keep up with that for the most part. So that works, right? So why it worked more or less was in a lot of ways, I would say it was kind of the best of both worlds, right? I had the time and the flexibility of an online environment. Students did like that, right? We had a lot of students who were working. Some of them were either my non-traditional students are all, you know, their moms, their dads, they're supporting their families and working full time and trying to do school. And I also had, you know, my younger students were my traditional students were working in some cases to support their help their parents support their families, because you know if their parents lost their jobs because of COVID or you know something like that. So um, they appreciated the flexibility and the time of having an online class, but also they liked guidance and support through that regular lecture. So that worked. For students who really just wanted to work online independently, we also had the traditional online feature, which is asynchronous, and you know it's just like what online's been for the last 20 years or so. Um, and that seemed to be popular as well, but I think we had more offerings of the live online. And yes, there were students who loved it and students that absolutely hate it and will never want to do online again. And then we have students who are probably going to stick with live online even as we go on to the next couple of years, um, and keep that as an option. So it did, I think it did work. It didn't work for everyone, but it did work, and could work. So the challenges, first of all, were technology. You know, and technology limitations, and you know, what is what we're seeing, basically, across the country. The technological divide, right? That's also kind of similar to the class divide. Zoom fatigue is a thing for sure. And I know in my case, I had in the fall, I had a Friday, once a week class on Zoom. That was too much Zoom for everybody. It ran from like 9 something to 12 something. So it was just too much Zoom in one, um, in one, at one time. It was just too much. I much prefer, and I think the students do too, the twice a week meetings on Zoom. And then of course, all the same challenges that you know, first year, first time community college students face, right? So nothing went away, and then all the technological changes, challenges and stuff also were added. So best practices for live online, I would say communication is number one, and so I'll talk about that. Consistency, clarity, and flexibility. Um, so communication, regular. Um, my students know to expect an email from me and an announcement post on Blackboard every Sunday morning. Right, so like clockwork, and I start immediately, usually the week before classes start. I create a welcome message. So a welcome message can take many forms. I like to do a video in which I have a quick PowerPoint of like rules and what they can expectations for the class, but also a tour of Blackboard so that they can get a welcome guide. And then I also write the condensed version that they can read it, at their leisure. So welcome messages are really helpful. And then multiple methods, or email is kind of, I would really like to, and eventually right now we're on Banner, but our school's adding a new ERP. I'll be able to text students in the future, which would be much more beneficial, I think, than email. But email, Blackboard announcements, office hours. I have them on virtually every week. And then the chat box on Zoom, which that's one thing that I'm gonna, if I don't teach on Zoom, I'm gonna miss that, because I have a lot of students who um, are very shy, very quiet. They're not going to talk, not going to verbally speak during class, ever. And but they'll talk to me through the chat box. And so in a lot of cases, our discussions on Zoom have been more robust than face to face, because I have students who are talking orally, right? Through the microphone, and then I have students that are typing in the chat box, and then sometimes those students will talk to each other through the chat, and so there's a lot more conversation, a lot more participation in not in every class, but in a handful of classes this semester and last semester both had that phenomenon. So I really like the chat box, and that's one feature that I would definitely miss in moving back to face to face.
Right, Emily, sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to let you know that we have just under 10 minutes. So you just are aware of where we're at, and we have time for questions at the end.
Okay, yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, thank you. All right, so consistency, right? I tried to maintain that natural rhythm from the start of the semester, and then keep going. And one thing I do when I start a lecture, I share my agenda on the whiteboard and of Zoom, and I kind of spent a couple minutes just reorienting students each class, especially since next week we'll be coming back from spring break, so I'm going to have to really reorient everybody, and so I like doing that. And then the students know what to expect from every class session, which I think is helpful, and then they know when their work is due, and what to expect from that. So as long as they know what to expect, hopefully they're able to keep up with the material, and then that's where kind of the flexibility comes in next. So for clarity, I was thinking, when I built my shell, I tried to build it with the student in mind, and I tried to have a clear path for students to follow, which I like folders that are labeled. So they can go to that. And so I try to clearly label links and folders. And I tried to limit the number of items that are on the sidebar of Blackboard, so that they're not overwhelmed by the number of links. That doesn't always work out so well, but I did try to keep it as clear and focused as possible, so that students wouldn't get lost. And then flexibility, right? So I had to be, and when the fall started, I realized, that I needed to be more prepared for technological issues than I had even originally thought. That we would have issues with Wi-Fi and poor microphones and cameras and user errors and all kinds of things. So sometimes I troubleshoot for students, and where I have students that they might spend half the period trying to log on to the lecture, and you know what, that's okay. I record the lecture, they'll catch it when they're able to. So being that, having that flexibility is even more important now. And then we have students that always had a myriad of possible issues that they would be dealing with, but I think all of those have increased exponentially since COVID, so that we have that. And then student success, right? We have those challenges. So being flexible in my teaching, planning, and grading that's really been important. And so I've been working on some kind of retention strategies, and I'm not actually talking specifically about 101E. I'm talking about all of my classes. Sometimes students need a reminder that they've missed an assignment. And so I've been much more focused in communicating with the students if they do miss an assignment, and then accepting their late work. I call it bending the system without breaking it. I want them to succeed, and I want them to get through the class. So I've had to be much less rigid in my teaching and in my planning and everything that happens. And basically, everything I do, as long as it's in the best interest of the students, then I feel good about what I'm doing. And so almost through the spring semester, and I think we're excited, at least at RCSJ, we're going to try to come back to some kind of normalcy in the fall. So that's an exciting time for them and for us.
Awesome. And Emily, we are at the 5-minute mark left in the session, which is perfect timing with your slide. And we do have a few questions, so I'll jump right in on those.
Okay.
You have 2 questions that are related to placement. So I'll start with those. How are students placed into the English courses? I know earlier you were mentioning testing into sections. Is that the only way that they're placed, or is there student decision involved? Can you give more detail about the placement process?
Yeah. So typically we use the AccuPlacer, and so that was the primary way. But then once COVID hit, we knew a couple things would happen. First, that students would not be able to take the AccuPlacer. So we had to come up with other means. So we look at their high school transcripts and GPA. So I think the advisors really take each student in consideration. And we also look at what program that they're going into. And so there's a lot of, I think they call it multiple measures of, in that decision when students can go either in. So I think we went by grades in whichever the last English they took in high school was.
Okay.
So we looked at those. We looked at the AccuPlacer. We looked at SATs. We look at ACTs. And I can't think of any other things, but multiple.
That's awesome. Yeah. And there are, kind of going off of that, there are a couple questions specific to the co-rec section. So first question is, how does this fit into the traditional semester schedule? So for example, is it 2 hours Tuesday and 2 hours Thursday, or what is the structure like?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it fits into their traditional. I think we add 20 minutes basically to the class. So it's a 4-credit class. So we have, I don't think we have any evening versions. We have Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday. I don't think we have a Friday class. So it's usually 140 minutes. Yeah, 100 minutes, sorry. 100 minutes, hour and 40 minutes, 100 minutes for
2 days a week.
Monday, Wednesday, and then for Tuesday.
Yeah. Awesome. And kind of combining a question related to the first 2, what if students get placed into the 4-credit hour class and don't think that they belong in that class? Is there a way that they can test it, or what happens if you get a student placed there that feels like it's a wrong placement?
Yeah, there's probably a couple things they could do. They could talk to their advisor, and then if they take there is such a thing as a challenge. Like if they, take the AccuPlacer once, and they get placed one time, there is that possibility of a challenge. But then there's also, they have to decide pretty early on whether they're going to drop an ad or
Right.
challenge it. But yeah, there are a couple of methods in place but usually it ends up not being an issue because if students are placed into the 4-credit class, I think they're informed that they're basically going to end up right where they need to be anyway. So I think for the most part, they would probably stay.
Yeah. And there's a couple more detailed questions about the co-requisite approach specifically. So those of you that have asked the following questions, we're actually out of time. So I'll do a quick run through, but if Emily doesn't have the chance to fully answer your question, I encourage you, her contact email is there. I'm sure Emily will be happy to answer it by email. But the questions really are related to the data and data on retention rates, as well as qualitative data to support the effectiveness of the co-rec model.
Yeah.
Is that something that would probably be best for someone to email you and can
Yes.
longer conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So for those of you
yeah.
with those retention and data questions, please go ahead and use Emily's email that is there and reach out to her directly to discuss that further. And with all of that said, it looks like we are out of time. Thank you for joining us, Emily. This is, I think, my second time moderating a session for you in some capacity, and it's always wonderful. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to launch a quick 3-question poll on the presentation that we just watched. Please go ahead and take a minute to send us your feedback.